Darkcast Network. Come to the dark side of podcasts. We have cookies.
Cookies? Me love cookies.
Hey Murderitas, I'm Danica.
And I'm Shannon.
We are the mother-daughter hosts of Murder and Mimosas,
A true crime podcast that strives to focus on lesser-known cases.
We personally think these episodes go down a little bit better with a mimosa.
You sip, we share.
So grab yours and get ready, because every Saturday at brunch time is a new episode.
You can listen to us on any podcast platform.
Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a lot. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Hey, Dylan.
Oh, my gosh. How are you?
This is like a farewell episode in a way.
It really is. We're sitting in our, we've been basically camping out in the house the last maybe week or so, and we're down to the last few pieces, and this will be our official last recording here in the Mountain Murder studio here in Western North Carolina. And we're soon to be on the road.
Our plan actually is to leave out tomorrow.
Oh, my gosh.
Right? So we're moving out of our home and into our ambulance, Lucy.
It's an ambulance.
Into our ambulance to begin an epic road trip.
True Crime Tour of America, brought to you by Mountain Murders.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to keep up with our adventures, a great way to do that is to find us on YouTube at Mountain Murders Podcast. Hit subscribe, and you'll never miss any of our uploads, our videos, our podcasts as we take on America.
Finally, a reason to actually go over to our YouTube channel. There's going to be videos and stuff.
Dylan, a lot of people listen to the podcast on YouTube.
I know they do.
So,
and we appreciate that.
I'll know what you're talking about. Yeah. And then, of course, you can find us on X at Mountain Murders Podcast and Instagram at Appalachian True Crime.
And people are finally starting to just call it X, not formally Twitter. Yeah, so it's really rebranding. It's taking hold.
Finally, after like 6 months.
And one of my favorite parts, one of the things we're really looking forward to, besides not being in Haywood County, North Carolina, is meeting listeners and patrons along the way. And we can't wait for that. You never know when we're going to show up outside of your house.
It's true. If you have a nice parking lot, a driveway, a couple acres, and you don't mind having Mountain Murders camp out on your property, shoot us an email, mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com.
And that's for reals.
We love a hot shower and a good meal.
We
Just
do.
Saying.
I can cook and I can move things.
We'll break bread.
I can lift heavy things. And so I'll pay you back.
I promise after about 10 minutes with Dylan, you'll want to break his bread. Dylan.
Hey.
I don't know if excited's the right word. I'm ready to discuss today's case.
This is a great one. It really goes to Heather's roots, especially here in our ancestry in the area. And I cannot wait. She's been just tickled to death about this case, and I can't wait to hear her tell it.
Okay, so here's the story, Dylan. Before my Nana passed away, I was spending some time with her. And she was a mountain woman. I mean, she grew up as country as they come. Hog slaughtering, gardening, farming. I mean,
wow.
Growing tobacco.
She's country as all get out.
Did you see her guns?
Yeah.
For a damn 80-year-old woman, she had guns.
Oh, yeah.
I've never seen some biceps on an elderly woman like my Nana had.
Y'all are good, solid stock.
Yes, we are. We are built from European peasantry. What can we say? No, but she told me a story. Her family is from Maggie Valley, and her mother's family was from what is now known as the Cataloochee Valley, which is a national park. But during the 1930s, before 1930, when it, became a national park system, there were many families who lived in the Cataloochee Valley. It falls right along the Haywood County border up against Tennessee line, Cobb County, Tennessee, Crosby, Tennessee.
Yeah, the Cosby area.
Is it Cosby or Crosby?
It's Cosby.
Cosby.
Yeah, Cosby, Newport area, all that. But me and Heather were talking just yesterday, just imagining, trying to put our, we were coming up an old road here in the area that's, and the way the road goes, it goes through like a little valley, so you could imagine. And we were really like full of wonderment at the moment. We were almost like children. We were imagining putting ourselves in someone's shoes that was traveling that road maybe, 200 years ago, because this is just a natural area where if you came out of the mountains, you would come this way, even if it's a footpath, a dirt trail, whatever. And we're talking about it taking, literal day or two to walk or ride a horse in areas that it takes us 10 minutes now with the modern roads and cars. And it's just it really slows you down. It kind of humbles you.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how hard life was back then.
Well, Cataloochee has an interesting history because, like I said, before the 1930s, there were families who lived there, chapel, church. It was a whole community. And then the federal government came in and bought out people's properties and homes, and they had to relocate. So there's some, I guess, bittersweet feelings, at least with some of the old timers, about our park system.
Yeah, and it's a really beautiful area. It's still hard to get to, still isolated. That's why they actually used it to reintroduce elk into our area, and you can still go there and see the old family homes, and then you can still see almost the outlines of the homesteads and the farms that they once worked. It's a really beautiful place.
Anyway, on with my story. So my great-grandmother, she grew up in Cataloochee, and her husband was from Maggie Valley, and he was in the logging industry. So all of this is going to tie into our story, and I'm going to get to that in a second. So he worked, logging, which was a huge industry here, and that was big in Cataloochee before the park system took over. My great-grandmother's family, they were Magahas, and the Magahas are going to play a part in our case today. Moving along, Dylan. So before my Nana passed, we were having a conversation about the podcast. She was a fan, and she was interested in true crime as well. And just suddenly, out of nowhere, she breaks into a song and sings me a murder ballad.
Oh, my gosh.
And goes on to explain that this is a murder ballad that she grew up with, that her mother sang it to her when she was young, and she always knew this murder ballad. And then goes on to tell me that it is a local murder ballad, that it is from right here in Haywood County, that a local woman wrote this actually as a poem, and it turned into a song. Well, I needed to know everything I could about this murder ballad, and I spent a year and a half researching, trying to find this murder ballad, Dylan, and I've only been able to find one recorded version of it. We will be playing that for you at the end of the episode.
Oh, it's haunting. It's beautiful.
Then I was obsessed with finding out more details about this murder case, what sparked this murder ballad. And today we are going to be talking about this case. So it has a very, close ties to where we are from, where we live. And I guess in some way it's kind of honoring my Nana a little bit.
Yes, this episode today is certainly going to go out to Nana Dorothy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love you, and
she was a card, as they say.
Only imagine the sights you're seeing now.
All right, Dylan, are you ready to begin with this very mountain murder?
I can't wait, and I gotta say, with murder ballads, and I've listened to quite a few from Mexico and places like that. They're always, no matter the culture, the language, even when you can't understand, the words, it's very soulful and emotional. There's a lot of I don't know. It's just, I don't know if it's because it's from real events or people write them with a lot of passion. And it seems like there's a lot of care taken. Usually it's not just done to make a song. And also, it doesn't surprise me that you had trouble finding a copy because this is literally part of the Appalachian oral history. And very
much so.
Very seldom are these actually recorded. Back then.
It's true, Dylan. Let's get into it. So Big Bend was noted for its crime and whiskey. At least that's what the old timers say.
What? Was there moonshining back in there?
It sits in the northeast corner of Haywood County, North Carolina, in what is known as the Pigeon Gorge. It was considered one of the most inaccessible, isolated communities in western North Carolina for a time. It was 35 miles to Waynesville and exactly 35 miles to Newport, Tennessee, across the state line into Tennessee. Big Creek, Hurricane Creek, even though it's called Hurricane Creek, people around here say Hurricane Creek.
We're going to go out Hurricane, have a few beers. You won't go with us?
True. Big Creek, Hurricane Creek, Cataloochee, and Cold Springs hurried down to the river below. And just across the mouth of Cold Springs on the opposite side of the river is Big Bend. The settlement, which was 4 miles from Madison County line, is now extinct. However, 150 years ago, it was settled by one family, the McGahas of Cosby, Tennessee. In February of 1857, Samuel McGaha and his wife Sarah obtained the first deed for 100 acres in Big Bend. It was an area not many wanted to settle. There was no store, no school, and no church. The nearest store was 11 miles away.
That might as well be 100 miles back then.
Families who made the push into Big Bend had to make an 8 to 10 mile trip carrying a few belongings and supplies on their backs by mule packs and oxen over Long Arm Mountain because there were no roads into Big Bend.
Wow. And, you know, I'm assuming this area now, I know where parts of this, I've been to parts of the area you just described, and it's fairly desolate still. There's just not much out there.
You had a fun adventure in that area.
Out 8 mile stretch.
Yes.
See, Eminem's not the only one that lived there. Our 8 mile stretch consists of dirt roads and hairpin turns and nothingness.
And people who look at you like you're not supposed to be up here when you pass by.
And even to this day, that's true. When you end up in these, there's these still these little family plots of lands and homes here and there, and you'll be out in the middle of nowhere on like washboard, gravel roads that you can only do about 8 miles an hour on the edge of, very steep banks, no guardrails, very little infrastructure. And they look at you like, what the hell you want with that river anyway, boys?
Yeah. You might find yourself staring down the barrel of a shotgun.
That's what old Cowboy Coward was such a good representation of a mountain man, because he really was a mountain man. And they keep to themselves and they're wary of strangers.
By the turn of the century, 8 families resided in Big Bend, named after the curve of the Pigeon River. By now, most of the families had intermarried. There were cousins, double cousins, and even like double first cousins. So close-knit ties, Dylan. Have you ever heard of a double first cousin?
I've never heard of a double first cousin.
Look, I got double first cousins in my family.
Now, how does that work? What is that?
Okay, let me explain this to you.
Yeah.
So my Nana Dorothy, we've mentioned Nana Dorothy, she married into a family. She married a guy, Bruce, right? So he's got siblings. He's a son, what have you. So she marries Bruce. And then her brother, George, marries Bruce's sister, Shirley.
Okay.
So you got brother and sister marrying another set of brother and sister.
Oh, is that double first cousin?
So my mom and then they become double first cousins.
Oh.
They become double cousins.
Oh, shit. Okay.
It's not inbreeding.
It's not. It's called line breeding.
Sure.
They do it. They do it in animals. And you reinforce the good qualities, but also sometimes the bad qualities.
Which is hashtag why my family has a lot of mental illness.
And this truly is, in my opinion, one of the reasons that in these isolated communities, and this is not...
Look, my other set of grandparents on my daddy's side, they're like 7th cousins, okay?
And this type of stuff is not, I'm sure people know, it's not exclusive to the Appalachian area. This is something that commonly happens in isolated communities.
Well, and nobility used to marry their siblings. So, I mean, come on.
Yeah. And so y'all be known as the Chin family or something. You all got the big chin.
The Habsburgs.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's double first cousins. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah. We got some double first cousins happening in my family, okay? We are very, very mountain people.
Y'all are top bred.
Yeah, I guess. What Big Bend did have was an abundance of moonshine and clannishness, Dylan. The lack of education and religious services, coupled with guns and flowing liquor, led to arguments and feuds, some lasting for generations.
Oh, my gosh.
We're talking Hatfield and McCoy style feuds.
Well, yeah, and if you do have a problem with the clan, as they like, I'm sure they refer to themselves back then still. If you did have a problem with your neighbor, your nearest neighbor, they're not going anywhere. So, they're going to be, their dad's going to be there, their grandpa, and the kids are just going to be right there. I mean, those tensions truly can go across generations.
There was frequent heartache over loved ones who'd turn up dead. A man didn't live to see old age in a place like Big Bend. These mountaineers held grudges, and hatred all too often led to violence. They were salt-of-the-earth people who could be kind but also cruel.
Yeah, and there's not a police, blocks down the street. So they really did usually handle this themselves.
Mountain justice.
Amongst themselves.
In 1860, Jonathan Creek and the Tennessee Mountain Turnpike were completed. It led through Cataloochee and Big Bend into Tennessee. And I'm assuming, Dylan, this is going to be maybe the modern day Interstate 40.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because in these areas, the topography is pretty rough. I mean, it's not like the Rocky Mountains or anything, but there's areas where you just go down natural lines of the land, and that never changes because, you would have to literally move mountains to, change the path. So they just keep building it up.
During the Civil War, Big Bend was occupied by primarily outliers who pushed through the wilderness across Long Arm Mountain to join McGaha on the Big Bend side. Small raids, skirmishes, and bushwhackers were not uncommon throughout Big Bend and East Tennessee.
They'd say things
at this time during this wartime.
They'd say things like, "Get 'em, boys."
Oma Hicks was born December of 1896 to Merritt Linville Hicks and his wife Nancy McGaha Hicks. Merritt and Nancy were some of the first-born children of settlers in Big Bend. So firstborn there, which is kind of cool.
Prince and Princess of Big Bend.
Oma was the third of 6 children who spent her life in the deep forests and lush valleys of the Pigeon River Gorge. In the Smoky Mountains, Oma had grown up with her moonshining relatives, carrying out the ancient practice of distilling. And I think a lot of people don't realize, Dylan, we have a lot of Scots-Irish here in Western North Carolina and in Appalachia in general. And this practice of making moonshine and whiskey actually came from our ancestors in the United Kingdom.
And that's no surprise because humanity and alcohol, the fermenting of whatever, have a very, very long history, thousands of years. As soon as we discovered it, we knew that it had practical purposes. It would kill bacteria and things like that, so it'd make the waters and the ales safe to drink.
Well, a lot of people consider it part of our cultural heritage here because it has been brought over from Europe generations, earlier. And it's a practice that we've been doing this for hundreds of years, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't think of moonshine as being part of our culture, but it is a huge part of our culture.
A big part. Now it's legal.
Caves and coves in Big Bend were used to hide out and protect the enterprise. When Prohibition became law, people still wanted their liquor. Moonshiners still needed to earn an income. Oma grew up learning every step of moonshining from corn to court.
Wow.
Though not much is known of Oma's childhood, we can gather she had little education, if any. The first report of Oma's life comes when she is 17 years old. In November of 1914, Oma married Benjamin Parker Naillon in Haywood County. Naillon was originally from Cott County, Tennessee, and he was 38 years old at the time. So a good 21 years older than Oma. That's a big age difference.
Well, it's a huge age difference. But it was culturally acceptable back then. That was no one would even blink an eye at that.
Naillon was the second youngest of 10 children. He also had limited education, which left him with few marketable skills when it came to obtaining employment.
And you see these very large families, during these times. And why do you think that is?
Oh, I was reading an interview that was conducted in the 1950s with one of the last remaining families that lived in Big Bend.
Wow.
And the gentleman in the article that's residing in this area is describing the different families around. And he's like, oh, yeah, the McGahas, they had like 16 kids.
Damn.
The Smiths had, 14. I mean, he's naming off, and it's these huge families. Can you imagine having 10, 12, 16 kids?
No. I don't even know where you put them all at. You'd have kids stacked on top of each other in the corner. But, and part of it is you need help around your homestead. And your kids are going to help. They're not going to. Back then, they worked every day just to, make it through the day.
My Nana told me stories about being 2 years old, that she was like a little tiny toddler kid. And one of her first memories is my granny sitting her up on a stool and giving her a spoon and making her stir this big pot of something. And she's like a little toddler.
Spoon's probably bigger than her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they need help.
But they worked.
Yeah. And I think another part is, people, you're intimate with the person you love, and babies just happen.
Well, when the lights go out, when the oil lamp goes out at night, Dylan, and it's cold and there's not a lot of entertainment, so I guess you got to get your kicks somewhere, right?
Yeah, on Route 66.
in Mama.
Under the sheets, under the quilt.
It's true. In 1900, Benjamin Naillon was living in Wise County, Virginia, with his brother, Dr. Naillon. Dylan, I had to look into this. He wasn't a medical doctor. Doctor was his real name.
Oh.
That was his birth name.
That's like we saw on one of those cooking shows. A guy was named Brother Luck.
Yes.
What a dope-ass name.
So, Benjamin is living with his brother, Dr. Naillon, where they boarded with the Owens family in Wise County. Ben was a day laborer, and the Owens had a daughter, Rose, who was 18 at the time. She and Ben began a relationship that eventually grew into marriage. But by 1910, Ben was a widower living in Wasatch County, Utah. Naillon had made his way west, working as like a ditch digger. He worked in ditch construction.
Okay. Wow. That's backbreaking work.
It was a low-paying job. Within a 6-year span, Benjamin Naillon had suffered great tragedy, Dylan. He lost his parents, he lost 2 sisters, and his wife within this 6-year period.
I don't even know how you absorb all that loss. I mean, honestly.
How Naillon ended up in Big Bend is a mystery. Sometime after a stint in Utah and Montana, he returned to North Carolina, and that is where he met Oma Hicks. 17-year-old Oma Hicks was considered quite fetching by the young men who grew up in Big Bend. Oma and Naillon slipped away to Waynesville, where they were married on November 11th of 1914. On their marriage license, Oma, who was just 1 month shy of her 18th birthday, lied, saying she was already 18.
Oh, wow.
Perhaps she didn't want to ask her parents' permission to marry. Ben also lied, saying he was only 32. The pair were married in a civil ceremony by the Justice of the Peace with 3 witnesses from town. None of Oma's family was in attendance and likely only learned of this marriage after it was done.
So they just got like random witnesses, it sounds like. Like, will you come witness this right quick?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
And Dylan, this is not completely uncommon. I have spoken to others, from this area, and you get to talking and they'll say that their grandparents eloped.
Oh, really?
And you know what? My great-grandparents eloped.
Hey, we was married by the Justice of the Peace with a random witness.
That's not true.
In the modern
we
day.
knew our witnesses.
You know. Like, look, if you come witness this, I'll give you a T-shirt.
But on my dad's side, my great-grandparents, they got married, and they were married like a whole month before they even told anybody. And I don't know why. I asked, and they didn't. They were like, I don't know. We were just scared to tell, I guess.
Well, I guess they're scared to tell. They're scared for someone to say no or raise some kind of an objection. So I guess it's what they say. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Because my papa was going off to World War II. He was going off to serve in the Navy, and he and my mama married. And then like a month later, finally told everybody.
Wow.
But kept it secret for like a month. But my mama said her sister found out. And she was like holding it over her head. And she is like, you can't blab.
She's trying to blackmail her.
Yeah.
I still haven't told anybody that I'm married to you, and it's been over 6 years.
Well, keep it a secret. I don't want it to ruin my street cred.
Well, I was going to say, you don't want to be connected to me in public either. I understand.
So Oma and Ben began a life together. Aside from moonshining, most of the men made a living by working in the lumber industry, whether it was by logging or running sawmills or working a sawmill. Old Joe Packett, one of the original Big Bend settlers, had something like 10 daughters, and he created the first sawmill at Big Bend. And the way it was described, Dylan, was he had a pulley belt running from a drive shaft to the wheel that was turned by crank, like a grindstone.
Yeah.
And his women folk were usually found turning the crank.
Yeah, I mean, I know guys who are the modern day mountaineers. I mean, they truly are. Some people around here really are keeping up the traditions, even with a modern twist. But one of their favorite pastimes is to just head up, and not a official trail where there's parking lots. I'm talking just have somebody drop them off in a pickup truck on the side of the road. They pick up a little creek. That you have a friend who does this type of thing, and they work that creek all the way up to somewhere else, way out where people never go, and they'll literally camp and eat what they catch in the river and just
fishing,
and have just a really light camp set with them and just go stay for a week out there by themselves. And a lot of them have told me about how you'll come across these narrow gauge old rail lines, and they're very small, and they'll just walk these, and they'll find all kinds of equipment, cables, harness, some
old
of the
artifacts.
Yeah, yokes and stuff they would use on the oxen or donkeys and things like that, mules. And I think that's very fascinating.
Yeah. My mom's grandfather, my great-grandfather, his name was Lee. He was a logger. And my mom has some really cool pictures in there from the 30s where they are, standing next to these trees.
Old growth trees.
That are, you got like 4 or 5 men in the trees, 4 or 5 feet taller than these men's, you know, and as big as, wide as 5 men standing side by side.
It's hard to believe even this area was covered by these huge old growth trees. That, I mean, it puts you me in the mind of the redwood forest when you see these pictures where they're, like you said, 5, 6, 7 guys standing shoulder to shoulder across the stump of a tree they just cut down by hand.
And it was logging that my great-grandfather married and met my grandma. So my great-grandfather was from Maggie Valley. He was a logger. He and his brother Floyd, they worked in these different lumber camps, and there was a lot of logging in Cataloochee Valley. They happened to be down there on a job, and he saw my granny. Her name was Ziomi.
Oh, wow.
He saw her. I think she was like getting water or something, and asked around, who's that girl, found out who she was, showed up at her family's home, and told her daddy, like, I want to marry your daughter.
And Dad's like,
and that was like the first time they met. So they spent a little time together, and then one of the next times he came to work in Cataloochee, they were married, and he took her to Maggie, far away from her family at the time.
So he just drove by and picked his bride up.
Pretty much.
That he picked out. And
but that's how it was done back then.
Wouldn't that be wild?
I should also mention she was 13, and he was 19.
Yes.
And this was totally acceptable back then.
Yeah, and I'm sure that even though I'm sure that her parents probably just want to get a feel for what the guy's like, that's why they spent some time together. But I'm going to guess she had probably very little say in what was happening as far as this relationship goes.
Probably, but you know what? They were married for 60-something years probably, so I guess it worked out, right?
Logging is the reason you're here.
I guess so. Ben worked as a day laborer while Oma kept house. And when you think of keeping house, Dylan, the way women were keeping house 70, 80 years ago, much different from how we keep house today. I mean, they're chopping firewood, you're cooking on a wood stove, you're fetching water, you're boiling water. If you're cooking 3 meals a day, it's everything's from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah, you're using a washboard at the river's edge, or maybe in a barrel at your home if you're lucky, to wash those dirty clothes.
So not only were men doing back-breaking work, but so were the women. Women were working hard as well.
Tending the animals, tending the crops.
Yes.
I mean, it's just a constant. And I think that's one of the problems with us nowadays is we don't realize that used to people just had to do all this hard work just to get through the day, just to survive one more day.
Well, Dylan, when people work hard, They have less time to sit around and whine and complain.
But they're also self-reliant. They're whether or not they eat through the winters rely on their hard work. They don't look to anyone else to provide these things for them.
No, I think people wouldn't have as many problems today if they actually had to do real work.
No, idle hands are an idiot's playground, right?
Yeah, they'll find something to be offended by. And it's like, well, maybe you need to get out and do some work.
Maybe you should make breakfast.
It's hard to be offended whenever you are kneading biscuits for 3 hours.
Yeah, and feeding your family of 17.
Churning butter.
Fresh turned butter, so good.
And it really is.
Oh, I'm going to get hungry. We better move on.
Okay, so Oma also liked to spend a lot of time with her lifelong friends, specifically Vester Brown, who had a serious crush on her.
The best names.
Another admirer was Brown's double first cousin, Scott Brown. So when Ben was working, Oma liked to entertain, keeping a crowd around their cabin. And it has been said that Ben Naillon was maybe not a fan of his wife's company.
So he's back and forth to the lumber camps, and they move as the projects get done. You know, they'll pick up stakes and put down somewhere else and cut more trees. And so he's kind of in and out of home. He goes away, I'm guessing, for days, maybe even weeks at a time, and then comes back, has a rest, and goes back. So he's not a big fan of her hanging out and hearing from people around that people are kind of hanging out, having fun around his cabin.
Well,
right?
I'm not going to say everybody, but most people have a tinge of jealousy. And I'm going to assume that most married people wouldn't like it if their spouse was hanging out with the opposite sex, especially if you knew these were people who like had feelings for your spouse, right?
Dude, look, even today, I think it's rude. It doesn't matter if it's the husband or the wife. I think it's rude, even if you're friends with everyone and everyone knows it's platonic and there's no tomfoolery of any kind between any of you. I think it's rude to be piled up sitting there talking to someone's spouse when they come in from a long day at work. I just think it's rude for the most part. I think it's because you come in, we've all done this. You come home, you're tired, you've had a yucky day, and people are there and they've been just chilling and they're kind of yucking it up, and you walk into that atmosphere, it kind of aggravates you. You know what I mean?
Well, you might feel a little resentful.
Well, it's not even about, if they're cheating or anything like that. It's just like, damn, I'm out working, and this is what I don't know. It's hard to explain, but I think it's rude personally, and I don't do it. Even if someone's like, hey, you can come in and wait for, so-and-so to get back. Nah, no, that's okay. If it's okay, I'll sit out here in my car. I just think it's rude.
So most men in Big Bend didn't tolerate a lot of back talk or that kind of behavior from their women. I mean, it was definitely a different time. Though there were no reports of any kind of domestic violence in the marriage, it has been said that Ben and Oma, maybe this situation was like a point of contention for them.
Okay.
That he did not appreciate his wife being in the company of other men.
Yeah, they had a fire, they had a bonfire, they had a fiddle up there. I'm telling you what, they didn't stop till 3 a.m. They had to pass some jugs of moonshine around.
That bitch dosey-doed around him a time too many.
They dosey-doed. She even promenaded. I caught her doing that, and I'm going to tell you what, they did a pretty good job of it.
Okay.
They're dancing together. That was square dance reference to anyone who doesn't know.
I conclude, yes.
I actually had to learn square dance in gym because that's where we come from, people.
Yeah, we all got to take some square dancing classes and line dancing.
Oh, he's got the partner.
It was really practical to do that instead of teaching us things like, like how to balance a checkbook.
Yeah. Do you want to know the simple ins and outs of stocks so you can grow your money from a very young age? Nah, don't worry about that.
We're not going to teach you budgeting, but
let's square dance.
We're going to do this achy breaky heart line dance. Now I need you to push your tush a little more.
Don't tell my heart, my achy breaky
In July of 1915, Vester Brown, who was 15 at the time, showed up at Merritt Hicks's house. Merritt is the father of Oma.
Oh, you got Vester. You got Merritt. These are such cool names.
I knew a Vester.
Did you really?
Mm-hmm. He's actually related to people in this story.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, anyway. Merritt was the father of Oma. So accompanying Vester was his cousin Scott Brown and another man named John McGaha. Vester was drunk and carrying a shotgun. He calls for Merritt to come outside, and the men exchange a few words, and Vester opens fire, shooting Merritt Hicks.
Oh, gosh.
Despite the fatal wound, Hicks was able to tell his family that Vester Brown was responsible. 54-year-old Hicks passed away the next day. Despite the fact that Brown, Scott, and John were arrested, none of the accounts offered a motive. In October of 1915, the three were all tried for murder. Vester Brown was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to spend 30 years in the state prison. Scott Brown and John McGaha were acquitted. So you've got Oma, her childhood friend Vester, shoots her daddy.
Oh, my God. This is a mess.
It's a mess. But Oma's life with Ben just goes on. Vester goes off to prison. Oma's lost her dad. She and Ben just kind of continue on. Then in 1916, after being married less than 2 years, Benjamin Naillon goes missing.
Now, you know, that term messy is a term used in the South, and I think black folks, white folks, we all use it. If someone says those people are messy or that family's messy, it just means they're just shitbirds, basically. They're always into some tomfoolery. They're irrational. You can't have any dealings with them or barter with them or anything because they're just a mess.
Oh, yeah. I've known a few of them in my day.
I know a few of them.
There's a few pockets of families here that I've grown up with that I know them, my mama knows them, my grandma knew them, and you say the family name, and people are like, "Oh yeah,
they're messy."
You just know.
Yes,
there's some shit. Yeah. So Ben and Oma at the time were residing in the Candler area of Buncombe County. As soon as Ben disappeared, Oma moves back to her family home in Big Bend. Oma made no claims that Ben had abandoned her or that he had any plans to move away. He was just gone without explanation. Nobody knew where he was. She's not talking. It's very strange.
Yeah, it is very strange.
Though it was long whispered that Oma's family had murdered Ben and buried him somewhere around Big Bend. After Ben's disappearance, he was presumed dead. However, according to laws at the time, if a husband disappeared, his widow was unable to marry for 7 years.
Damn.
No death certificate has ever been issued because Ben's body was never found.
Would you mourn me for 7 years? I mean, you like wearing black anyway, so I mean, that wouldn't bother you.
I would mourn you for an eternity.
Oh, baby. That's what I was going to say to you.
You drive me so fucking crazy.
I'm mourning you right now.
You make me madder than hell.
Oh.
I tell you, Dylan, I've never quite met somebody like you. But I love you.
That's one of the sweetest things you've ever said to me.
I love you, and I can't stand you all at the same time.
And you know what? We're about to live in an ambulance together.
It's an array of emotions. I know, and you've been really manic like the last week or so.
Yeah, I know.
And you never shut up, and your energy is like on 400.
You keep asking me what drugs I'm on. I'm not even on drugs.
You've gotten on my last nerve.
It's like I told
for like a week.
My partner and my friend, this is me sober. This isn't me with no weed and no beer in my hand.
It's exhausting.
All right, but
sometimes I just want quiet, Dylan.
We're gonna hold it together.
Peace and quiet. Well, I have my AirPods charged. I'm ready to ignore you. I usually check out after about the third or fourth thing that you say, so we're good.
And I don't even notice.
So I know you just keep talking. In 1920, prohibition became law. So hard-drinking men didn't take too kindly to the idea that the government was telling them what they could and couldn't do, especially when it came to drinking. The folks up in Big Bend seized the opportunity to sell moonshine. Up on the mountain, business was booming. There were stills just tucked away in about every holler, hill, ridge.
Yeah, I imagine this is much like if our listeners have seen the movie Lawless. I'm sure this is a very much just like that. At night, you can see little tiny fires all over the mountainsides where people are working their product. But this is basic economics. Don't worry about that. This is basic economics. You're providing a service that all of a sudden becomes very popular and the demand skyrockets. And you already have the know-how and the ability to create these spirits outside of government control. It's because that's what you've been doing the whole time.
Well, they were doing it already.
I'm saying so.
But now they just have an opportunity to
sell it to the masses.
To ramp up their revenue, right?
Oh my gosh. I bet this was like 120, 30, 40 proof alcohol, folks.
By 1930, Oma's life had continued in Big Bend. She was helping her family make and sell liquor. Oma knew where the stills were, how to operate them, and where to make drop-offs. She had also remarried again, this time to Scott Brown, Vester's double first cousin.
Yeah, one of the common things, and I'm sure she knew all about that, were dead drops. And I think that's probably used to this day for various things, is where you have a secret little hidey hole somewhere and you put the product in there, and then the person comes by when you don't even see each other, and they make an exchange. You come back and get the money.
I know where your hidey hole is.
Oh, really?
You got your little prison purse.
Ooh, come on. Don't call it that.
Your little hot pocket.
That's what, you know what?
I be trying to hide stuff in there all the time, and you won't let me.
No, I won't. I won't even let you look at it.
Just let me see it.
I got to live in an ambulance with you.
There is no record of the marriage in Haywood County or Cocke County, Tennessee. So if she had to wait 7 years to marry, then it's probably likely that she and Scott Brown married maybe around 1923 or just after. That would have been the waiting period.
Okay.
After her husband went missing. Scott Brown had enlisted in the Army during World War I in June of 1917. He was wounded and returned home on April 15th of 1918. While they lived in Big Bend, Scott was employed by Pipes Brothers, who were lumbermen. Brown and his buddy from Big Bend, Mims White, spent weeks working at a lumber camp near Sunburst, which is just outside of Canton, North Carolina. I'm sure Oma was lonely with her husband working these long stretches out of town. Yet she always seemed to have plenty of young men to keep her company, including Vester Brown, who was released from prison after serving a 15-year sentence for murdering her daddy.
And she's hanging around him still?
They're still buds, Dylan.
Golly, Bob.
Maybe more. On August 12th of 1930, Mims White sent a letter to his wife asking that she meet him in Canton, North Carolina, where he was going to be picking up a paycheck. Scott and Mims left their clothing behind with some relatives in this area of Sunburst or Canton, like where they had been working, and they set out for Big Bend. They were seen at the home of Gray Henderson. Then several nights later, the pair stayed with Joe Packett. You remember Joe Packett? He's got like 10 daughters.
Yeah.
He got that sawmill.
Them old Packett girls.
Got the women folk cranking the wheel.
Gosh, with big,
Turning the crank.
Big leather belts.
When Scott Brown was at Packett's house, he went to a nearby spring where he caught his wife Oma with Vester Brown. Now, I don't know what they were doing at the spring. Maybe they were just having a cool drink.
Yeah, maybe they were parching their thirst.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But it is known that Scott
Brown.
Scott quarreled with Oma and Vester when he sees his wife with this other man. It was also said that Scott Brown and Mims White stayed at Vester Brown's mother's house for a night.
I would be like, he shot your daddy and you're hanging around with him.
The men, meaning Scott and Mims, had some extra pairs of shoes with them. Vornell Brown and Frank McGaha. Vornell, by the way, is Vester's half-brother. They stole some of these shoes. Now, at the time, Brown and White thought it was funny. At least that's what other people who were privy to the situation, that's what they said. That Scott and Mims were kind of laughing. Like, them boys stole our shoes. Like it was a joke.
Like it was no big deal.
Right.
Right.
But they did return to Brown's house looking for their shoes before, they needed to depart.
Now, shoes are a big deal. And they're not easy to come by during this time. They're handmade. They're costly. So, yeah, I mean, this is not just some silly little thing. You have shoes. Those shoes have to last you for a very long time. So it's maybe kind of a big deal.
So it seems that on August 22nd, they returned to Brown's home looking for the shoes. Didn't find them. So that's when Scott and Mim started the trek out of Big Bend. On their way to the Cataloochee Road, they had to climb a rough ridge, and it was a really long climb to the gap. After hiking up the Cataloochee Road at the top of the ridge, folks would sometimes stop at the resting log, Dylan.
Okay.
It was a literal log
You could sit on.
where people would stop and sit and rest.
And when anyone said they're over by the resting log, everyone in the area
Everybody
knew exactly where you're talking about.
exactly the resting log, exactly.
I think we need more resting logs in public nowadays.
You can just make your own. Any spot's a resting spot if you're tired.
You know, I was seeing these right quick. I've seen these expats talking about living in other countries, and they were just amazed by how other countries think and treat their green spaces. And people will go there and just stay like all day because, you know, it has all the things. It's super comfy. Everything's convenient, bathrooms, whatever. But here in America, this is really sad. We make our public seating a lot of times, especially in urban settings, as uncomfortable as possible for the fear of someone like sleeping on it or staying there for too long or sleeping on it overnight. Isn't that just a weird mindset to be in?
Yes. Back to the rest log, Dylan. So it was also known as a lover's lane spot where young couples would meet for trysts.
Oh.
Like maybe if you wanted to do some necking, you might meet at the rest log.
So the resting log is not the only log in the area.
Or you just want to hang out and hold hands, you might want to meet at the rest log. On that bright summer day, Scott and Mims reached the resting log, but were surprised to find Oma with Vester.
Resting on it.
They're resting on this big log together.
I declare.
Scott angrily asked, "What are you doing up here with Oma?" The men exchanged words. Oma became frightened, and she walked a half a mile down the mountain to the still. There's a still involved, Dylan. As she hurried off, Scott called out to his wife, quote, "There goes that bob-haired hussy to Cataloochee now. Bet you're going to Carl Miller."
Damn, that's some strong words.
Well, Oma had bobbed her hair, and a lot of the men in Big Bend found it very exciting.
Oh my gosh. So because she would be maybe possibly the only woman with bobbed hair in the area?
Maybe.
Damn.
Plus, I love the word hussy, and I don't feel like we use it enough
No,
anymore.
we're bringing hussy back.
We are. Scott Brown also told his wife to let Carl Miller know he was there waiting, but Oma didn't respond to this. When Oma reached the still, Frank McGaha was working it along with Vornell Gates, which, remember, sometimes he's called Gates, sometimes he's called Brown, but he is Vester's half-brother, Vornell. These were men that Oma had known her whole life. She seemed rattled when she told Frank, quote, "Scott's up there in the gap, and he's going to kill Vester." Vornell Gates grabbed a .41 caliber Swiss rifle, which belonged to Frank McGaha. Gates said, "He won't hurt Vester if I can help it."
Not on my watch.
Scott Brown and Mims White were never seen again. Their families made frantic inquiries about their whereabouts, but received no answers. The men had not returned to work at the lumber camp, and they certainly were not in Big Bend. In October, Mims White's family made a trip to speak to an attorney in town named M.G. Stamey. Stamey contacted law enforcement. The sheriff and his lawmen were unable to find any trace of the men. Meanwhile, federal agents led a dramatic raid at a still in Big Bend. After wading through freezing water at 3 feet deep in the Pigeon River, the agents tramped through miles of deep, heavy snow until they found the moonshiners' outpost. Despite the moonshiners keeping guards posted like as a lookout, agents were able to capture the one on duty. The raid continued until agents arrested Vester Brown and Vornell Gates, taking them to Buncombe County Jail. The pair were locked up with another man named Verlin Smith of Big Bend. So the three of them are arrested, and they are charged with illegal
Moonshinery.
moonshining.
Can you imagine how cold that water would be in the winter?
Fuck no.
Because this is, we've said it before, but for new listeners, this is what's referred to as a headwaters county. I think there's only one body of water, a small creek that actually flows into the county. Everything else flows out of it. So all this water is literally coming from snow melts and out of the mountains, out of springs and things like that, and rainfall. So yeah, it would be freezing.
It gets cold.
It gets super cold.
That water is cold as it's cold as hell in the damn summertime.
You have to wait till it's 90 degrees outside, and it's been that way for a week before you can even think about getting in the river.
And then you jump in the water, and you get out, and your lips are blue, and your fingers are numb because it's cold.
I've seen many a kid up the river, as they say, with their teeth a-chattering, but they will not get out of the water because they love it so much. It's so fun. But it is so cold.
It is cold. You swim, you see a little salamander.
So there's a lot going on here in your story. You have these interpersonal issues, of the small, tight-knit community that are going on for years, it sounds like. But then you also have prohibition. It's this big, huge thing happening in the country, and federal agents, revenuers seeking out these illegal stills. So it's pretty amazing.
So after this raid, a letter arrived for Attorney Stamey. It was written by the father of a 14-year-old boy named Oliver Smith who resided in Bessemer City, North Carolina, which is a good 2.5 hours away.
I've been to Bessemer City.
So, what's this young boy from Bessemer City know, Dylan? Well, according to the letter, the young boy had witnessed the murders of 2 men. This boy, Oliver Smith, was brother to Verlin Smith, recently arrested in this moonshine raid.
Nice.
Oliver Smith stated that he had seen Frank McGaha and his brother Cass McGaha kill the 2 men, Scott Brown and Mims White. The McGahas, who were being held on unrelated weapons charges, were arrested for the murders. Smith alleged after the men were shot, they were buried under the still barrels belonging to Hollis Sutton, which is the person who had this still that was raided, and that they were buried 8 feet under the still barrels.
So the still area that has just been raided while all this other stuff's happening is where the bodies are.
Yes,
underneath.
According to 14-year-old Oliver Smith.
Now, if people have never seen this still would be like a big tank. It'd have the various tanks on it, and it's actually it's likely made out of copper, especially then, and so that would actually be a pretty good place to hide a body.
Yet law enforcement cut down the still, and there were no bodies buried there. However, 3 weeks later, the sheriff drops the murder charges. Oliver Smith, it turns out, had not witnessed any murders, but had only heard rumors and gossip. Smith's father concocted the story, hoping his young son could collect on the reward that was being offered. After this, a friend of Frank McGaha shows up at the sheriff's office in town, offering up information that Scott Brown and Mims White had gone to Mexico. In a strange twist of fate, a Chicago detective named J.J. O'Malley decided to vacation in Waynesville, North Carolina. It was on a whim after he read about an area called the Land of the Sky. And he had never been here before, knew nothing about it, but had seen this article and was like, I need to visit this place. It sounds beautiful. So he just shows up in town. He had never been to Waynesville, as I mentioned. So while he is in town vacationing, folks start inquiring about his life in Chicago, and they learn that he is a lawman. So they're like, okay, he's a big city detective. He's fighting Al Capone.
He's one of them Pinkertons.
So people suggested that O'Malley could assist with the missing men from Big Bend. Finding the case to be intriguing, O'Malley agreed to spend his vacation investigating. But he's kind of doing this like off the books. This is just sort of like something he's doing for fun while he's in town.
Right. He has no jurisdiction. He has no direction from his bosses or anything. But, him being, as you say, big city detective, if you will, I could see that really, that the word of that spreading very quickly. And you have these people who've been missing and no one knows what's happened. So their friends and family are going to want answers. No different than anyone else, even in the modern day. They want to know what happened to their loved ones.
Well, absolutely. There were no clues, and O'Malley had to work quietly on what meager information was available. Again, he's an outsider.
Outlander.
People around here don't take too kindly to outsiders, especially some big city know-it-all cop from Chicago poking his nose in things. Dylan.
Slick-haired.
Probably. So O'Malley learned that Oma Brown had been residing in Big Bend during the time of her bereavement, but that she had actually been there before her husband had even gone missing. He visited the homes of Gray Henderson and Joe Packett, retracing the steps of Brown and White. It was Joe Packett who told O'Malley about the quarrel between husband and wife, that Scott Brown had caught Oma at the spring with Vester Brown. So all of this information starting to kind of make its way out of Big Bend.
So he's getting all the tea.
He's getting the tea. O'Malley followed the men's journey, climbing the steep ridge and stopping for a few moments at the resting log. After investigating the surroundings, O'Malley learned there was a still half a mile down the mountain from the log that had been in full operation back in August when the two men had gone missing. O'Malley was able to learn it was a chance meeting between Oma, Vester, and her husband Scott Brown at that rest log. Back in Waynesville, O'Malley shared his findings with the sheriff and Attorney Stamey. They were impressed by the man's earnestness and dedication to cracking this case.
Well, yeah, he's putting this. It's not easy for him to get around to all these areas. He's unfamiliar with the areas as well, and so he's putting all this time in, and he's creating he's creating the timeline and last known whereabouts and stuff. This is very important. They may be blown away by his investigative techniques.
He also learned during this trip that there was a boy named Rufus Price of Big Bend who had been arrested since the men's disappearance. During the time of his arrest, Price told officers he had information that might be of interest regarding Scott Brown and Mims White. But at the time, the lawmen dismissed Price's ramblings as just an act of desperation. Like he's just trying to get out of trouble.
So we ain't buying it.
Yeah. The Chicago detective attached more significance to the ramblings than the local men did. Frank McGaha had managed to stick up a man near Lake Junaluska and was in custody for that crime at the time. O'Malley recalled that Frank McGaha was the still operator on the mountain where Brown and White had gone missing. So O'Malley pays McGaha a visit in jail on a Sunday when most everyone else is at church. So after spending a few hours in his cell, O'Malley was finally able to get Frank McGaha talking. He told the detective confidently that he did not know what happened to Scott or Mims. But then he went on to say, you know what? They were murdered.
Uh-oh.
And I know where they're buried. But I didn't have anything to do with it.
So you have a second person. The first one, obviously, just full of shit from, like you said, 2 hours away. That might as well be 2 states away. Had no idea of the real truth. So here now you have a local saying, here's what really happened.
And here's the guy who operates the still on the mountain where the men have gone missing.
So this could be that tip that breaks this case wide open.
O'Malley was startled if this was true. So the following day, which was a Monday, McGaha led a team of lawmen to the rest log in that gap near Big Bend. From there, he took them over the trail about 50 yards away to what he called a sinkhole that was actually made by the uprooting of a large tree.
Yeah.
The depression was filled with the season's leaves. McGaha told O'Malley and the others, they are there.
And that would be a pretty great spot to throw a body, hide a body.
After laborious digging, human remains were discovered, Dylan. One victim had a skull broken into 16 pieces. The other showed a bullet hole from a heavy calibered rifle.
Skull broken into 16 pieces? Wow.
A piece of paper was found inside this makeshift grave with the address of Mr. Carl Miller.
Now, I'm just curious, how in the hell is this paper holding up?
And it was as if it had just accidentally been dropped down in this grave.
See, they even made paper better back in the day.
You're goofy.
It can stand up to the elements and water.
The skulls were eventually identified by dental records. It was reported that Scott Brown had a gold tooth. The men's clothing was also well enough preserved that relatives were able to identify this is Scott Brown and this is Mims White.
That's his favorite coveralls.
Frank McGaha recounted how Oma had shown up on that August day at the still frantic. She was upset and worried that her husband Scott Brown would kill his cousin Vester. According to Frank, Vornell, which is Vester's half-brother, grabbed the rifle and went up to the resting log. About 15 minutes later, he heard 5 or 6 gunshots ring out. Frank alleged that he then ran up the gap, and when he stepped out of the bushes up at the top, Vester pointed a gun at him and said, "Halt." When Frank asked what happened, Vester told him nothing, and if you tell, we'll kill you.
Oh, gosh.
Vornell Gates picked up Mims White's body, tossing it over his shoulder, and started down the trail. Vester picked up Scott Brown's body, carrying it away, and then he tripped over a tree root and dropped him. Vester then carried Scott's body, following Vornell, to the sinkhole. The 2 bodies were thrown into the sinkhole. Vornell then went to the still to fetch a mattock and shovel, and that is when the pair proceeded to cover the remains with dirt. The men then rubbed dirt on their knees and pants where blood had dripped onto them. The men returned to the rest log where Vester met Oma. Vester and Oma returned to Big Ben together. Of course, O'Malley immediately focused his attention on the Mountain Romeo Vester Brown, who had taken Oma from her spouse, his own cousin. O'Malley was intrigued to learn that Brown was responsible for the murder of Oma's father 15 years earlier. So, of course, I mean, probably just like we are, like, what the fuck? He is also equally, I guess, confused by their relationship, given that this young man has murdered your father.
Well, I guess if you don't care for your father, you hate your father, would be the only way that really sets with me. I mean, I don't know.
It's very strange. It was learned that there seemed to be an ongoing feud between these cousins, these double first cousins and these half-brothers, and that Oma Hicks Brown was like a pawn in it all, or at least some kind of player involved, right? But what role did Oma play in the murders? Was she a manipulative Black Widow, or did she just sort of happen to be kind of in a wrong place, wrong time, and gets involved peripherally,
right,
if you will? The arrest of all parties followed McGaha's confession. Each suspect was put through a grueling interrogation, yet the suspects told nothing or offered up different stories from what Frank had said. Carl Miller, who was not liked by any of the family clans involved, denied having any knowledge of the murder or that he was having any kind of affair with Oma. Miller suggested that he was somehow being framed. That's why his address is dropped down into this grave.
Right.
He's had no part of this.
Well, I mean,
he's like, I don't know why. I'm not involved in any way. Vester Brown denied the accusations as well. After repeated denials, Vornell Gates finally agreed to make a confession. Gates told that he and McGaha were working the still when Oma Brown appeared. She told them Scott and Mims had caught her at the rest log with Vester, and she was worried about what they would do, meaning Scott and Mims, what they were going to do to her, that she feared for her own life. The men got their run of liquor out first, because that's the most important thing.
Well, it's just it's good business.
You got to finish your run. And then that's when they left to go join the others at the rest log. According to Gates, Mims was talking about his shoes and how he wanted them back. So they're having an argument about the stolen shoes. Frank McGaha whispered to Vornell Gates to hit Mims with the gun, with the rifle. And Vornell did hit Mims in the head with the gun, but didn't mean to kill him. He was just trying to get him to shut up.
Well, sounds like he did it awful hard.
When he realized Mims was dead, that's when Frank used a pistol to shoot Scott Brown. And once Brown fell, Frank shot him 2 more times. Then Frank McGaha walked over to the trail where Mims White had fallen, and he shot him with the gun.
Just to make sure they're dead.
The men then carried the bodies around the hill to the sinkhole where they were buried. Frank carried Scott Brown while Vornell Gates carried Mims White. Vester Brown did not join them at the sinkhole. So he was not the shooter. He was not an accessory, like when it comes to burying the bodies or anything like that. Frank searched through Scott's pockets, and Vornell took a watch belonging to Mims White. They didn't have any money in their pockets, so they said they were not able to steal any money from the deceased men.
And you believe he had the nerve to not have no money in his pocket after I killed him?
I did get his little old watch, though. There was really a quote in the paper where Vornell said, "I did get his little old watch, though," and I could just hear it in my head.
Yeah,
saying it.
Well, it's probably like a family, probably his dad's watch or something.
Probably from the damn Five and Dime.
Oh, you think so?
Leave that man's watch alone.
Yeah, maybe it was like one of the first swatches.
I doubt
and it
it.
had a super dope band on it.
So when they returned, Oma continued saying that Scott Brown would kill her. Like, once they have disposed of these bodies and they're back at the rest log, Oma is very worried that her husband's going to harm her. She asked several times where Scott was, and that's when Gates and McGaha told her, quote, "They went out to the top of the ridge." Vester Brown confirmed this version of the story and added that he had witnessed Scott Brown and Mims White, who were unarmed, engaging in a fist fight with Vornell and Frank McGaha before being killed. According to Vester Brown, the fight had been over the stolen shoes. It was Vester who placed the paper with Carl Miller's name in the sinkhole with the bodies. When confronted with the confession of Vornell Gates and Vester Brown, Frank McGaha broke down and admitted his role in the slayings. He agreed the trouble had started over the 2 pairs of stolen shoes. Yet investigators, especially O'Malley, were hard-pressed to believe the men had been murdered over shoes, especially given this love triangle, which seemed to be happening among the cousins and Oma.
Yeah.
O'Malley believed that it was more about the love triangle than the stolen shoes.
Right.
Yet others who were from the area, who live here, know that in rough mountain country, a lack of shoes is no laughing matter.
Well, that's what I was saying.
And especially during the Great Depression.
Yeah, that's what I was saying
so
earlier.
The idea these men were shot over their boots or their shoes didn't seem so far-fetched to most local people.
Well, no, if you have to walk out of an area and somebody's took your damn shoes, I mean, you don't just grab another pair. And most people, I would be willing to bet people either had no shoes or one pair of shoes that was their pair of shoes. They didn't have any spares. They had nothing you could borrow. And it would piss you off to no end if you had to walk out up through the woods and these rough trails and paths with no shoes because somebody took your shoes. So though that might not be the entire reason, that certainly could be part of the reason, or it could be the one thing that took it on over the edge.
O'Malley had achieved confessions from Frank, Vester, and Vornell. He then set his sights on clearing up the mysterious disappearance of Oma's first husband, Ben Naillon. In the end, however, O'Malley was unable to solve that case. He felt Oma knew more than she was saying, not just about Ben Naillon, but about the double murder, and he believed she was an accessory. Yet in every statement given by the 3 men, they all testified that Oma had known nothing about the murder and had nothing to do with it. So in the end, blood is thicker than water, and they would not let their childhood crush Oma go down for murder.
Oh, wow.
They all seem to be set on covering Oma's sex. At a July trial, the 3 men pleaded guilty to murder in the 2nd degree. Frank and Vornell were given 15 to 30 years for each of the murders. Vester, who pled guilty to 2nd degree murder in the death of Mims White, was given 15 years in prison. Oma was also tried for murder, but she pled not guilty, and this was accepted.
So, okay.
However, she was given 12 months in prison for her role in the illegal liquor charges. Frank McGaha, who was 20 at the time of the murders, served time but was given early parole. In 1952, he fell into a rock-crushing machine in Canton, North Carolina, and died. He was only 41.
Which is a ripe old age back then.
In July of 1932, Oma married Carl Miller.
Dang, Oma.
The couple never had children, but remained married until his death in 1960. Oma Hicks Naillon Brown Miller died on April 18th of 1974 at the ripe old age of 77 years old. She is buried alongside her husband Carl Miller at Garrett Hillcrest Cemetery in Waynesville. And though they did not have children, it is said that she raised her niece, like she adopted a niece and raised a niece. The murder inspired a poem written by Sarah Rathbone called Up on Big Pigeon, which has also become a local murder ballad. And Dylan, we are going to play that murder ballad for our listeners. So that is the wild tale of Oma and the Big Ben killing.
It just proves some tropes and ideals people have about mountain folk to this day. They're insular. They stay to themselves. They protect each other at all costs, wary of outsiders. But I got to say, O'Malley must have been some kind of detective. I mean, I don't think he was. I think he really was a big city detective.
You think so?
Well, he's kicking ass and taking names, bud.
Maybe he just knew the right questions to ask.
Well, yeah, and I think
maybe he just cared.
Well, yeah, I'm sure.
Maybe he didn't mind because he's not from here, so he didn't care to ruffle feathers and kind of make his way into this insular community. Maybe like some of the local law just sort of felt like this is family feuding.
Right. And even though they
don't want to get involved,
protective, obviously, the way they kind of protected Oma in the various situations. But there's always some people in the community who don't agree with what's happened and do want answers, the family, the friends. So it doesn't surprise me that he kind of, just by shaking the tree, he kind of made it break loose there and got some, solved everything.
When he was shaking, was it a sugar tree he was shaking, Dylan?
That's right. All right, Heather. Well, thank you for that incredible mountain tale. And I think it's a very fitting last episode here in the studio.
I think so.
And I think this brings a close to a chapter. In our chapter here in this particular spot in the Appalachians, we're going to be all over. And Heather has very deep roots, like 59 generations or some shit like that.
59 generations.
But no, literally like 10 generations deep. And I want to tell her thank you for letting me be part of your life and part of this podcast, because we're going on, we're heading to our 6-year anniversary, this December. And it's been amazing, and I've really had a lot of fun getting to know people and just being part of some long-form content like this. I never imagined that I would have this opportunity. So I want to thank you, and we want to thank the area here. We complain about tourism and things like that, but it's a beautiful place, and it really is full of really good people.
And it really is home.
It really is home, and we'll be drawn back here more than once, I'm sure. As soon as Heather finishes up and we say bye, I'm going to literally break this stuff down. And I can't wait to see what the new adventures bring us.
It's true. So make sure you follow us again on YouTube. And if you are not subscribed on Instagram, find Appalachian True Crime, because we will be posting videos, photos, all the adventures from our road trip. And of course, we're going to keep the podcast going. So we'll have lots of new true crime content for you. Very excited. Dylan, let's wrap up with playing a version of the murder ballad known as the Big Ben Killing. It's performed by Alice Gerrard. And like I said, it is the only recorded version of the song that I have been able to find. So we hope that you enjoy it. And we will be back soon with a midweek and kind of an update on how our first week's going in the rig in Lucy. In the rig, right?
Oh my God.
Okay, bye.
Up on Pigeon River, down at the Big Bend, I suppose you've all heard of the women and men. The ladies conversed, oh, it was a sight. They'd taken Mims White and Scott Brown's life. Up on the mountain not far away, When Oma and Vester were to pass time away, was there at the rest log just sitting around. Up came Mims White and on his husband Scott Brown. Oma ran off around the hill to Vernal and Frank at the moonshine still. She went to them in an awful fright, saying, I am afraid they'll take Vester's life. They just worked on till they got that run out. Said, we will go up and see what's about. They went up the mountain in nearly a run. They was teeth to a large cavalry gun. Far off sons are going to hear the news. Scott and Mims mended their socks and their shoes. They put them on quickly with nothing to say, and enough sorrow was soon laid away.